earlier this evening, I spoke to the man who was Secretary of State for Climate Change when the last set of climate talks happened in Copenhagen, Ed Miliband. I asked him whether there really was a better chance of agreement at the Paris summit than last time round.
Well, I must say your film brings back slightly unhappy memories. But look, this is such a hard thing that the world is trying to pull off. It's like a Rubik's Cube with many, so 195 sides that you're trying to solve. Now, that means you're not going to succeed first time round. And so I think Paris will represent progress. It will represent progress because every major emitter is saying it's actually going to take action. It looks like it's going to make progress on climate finance. And therefore, we're going to have to get there in stages, I think. Let's
look at the last time there was a binding agreement. Let's look at Kyoto.
Sure.
As soon as you had a Republican administration, and Kyoto was torn up as far as America was concerned. So presumably an incoming Republican administration should just turn around and boot this out because there are no world policemen on this.
No, that's true. That's true. But I think some people have talked about having sanctions and all of that. Maybe that's something that will have to be looked at in the future. But personally, I think there are reasons for optimism. Look, I'm not involved in crafting this agreement, but as an objective observer, I'd say we're not where we need to be, but perhaps in a better place than I expected us to be.
You are putting the case for Britain to unilaterally sign up to zero emissions, but why on earth would Britain put itself at such economic disadvantage for actually a minimum improvement to world climate? It would be something that would be totemic and it would be to our disadvantage.
Well, I don't agree with that. I'm putting the case for a long-term goal of zero emissions for the world, because that's what the science tells us is necessary. I think we can get that in Paris, but I'm also putting the case for Britain to reflect that commitment in our own domestic law. And I'll tell you why, Kirsty, because you say it'll be bad for our economy. I think quite the opposite. Businesses from Richard Branson to Paul Polman of Unilever to Ratan Tata are all saying, actually, this will give us a sense of certainty. This will give us a sense of where we're working towards. And look, there's going to come a point when the carbon budget for the world will be exhausted. And we might as well anticipate that now and plan towards it. And I think that's what the world should do, and I think it's what Britain should do as well.
But you're also, in a way, with this kind of what you would say would be a very radical agenda of zero emissions, kind of denying the right of developing countries to industrialise. And where does that square with your promise to reduce world poverty? You have to allow countries, surely, to industrialise, to raise the standard of living for their people.
Absolutely right, and that's why I think we can be optimistic for the following reasons. Look, first of all,
but not on zero emissions, not signing countries in South America, not even signing China up to
we're going to have
emissions.
to get to that point because of the science, but here's how countries can also develop. First of all, the rich world is going to have to do its bit to give poor countries the space to develop. Secondly, climate finance as part of this agreement for developing countries is very important. And thirdly, look, the low-carbon path is actually something developing countries are already pursuing.
In terms of leading the way, let's talk about personal responsibility. 5 years ago, it was very much in vogue to talk about demand management. There were campaigns about reducing people's own carbon footprint and so forth. That's just gone now. Why?
I don't think it's gone completely. I think the British public, look, there have been lots of other issues that people have been focusing on, but I think the British public still care about this. I think it's not something that people don't recognise as important, but of course it's, the action we take now is about our children and their children. Now I think it's incredibly important we do act on this.
So do you actually monitor your own carbon footprint?
I try and keep it as low as possible, but I'm not presenting myself. I'm not presenting myself as a paragon of virtue.
How do you actually say, well, I took a flight to Brisbane, I took a flight to Boston, I ran the washing machine 10 times. I mean, what do you actually do?
There's a whole debate about this, but the biggest thing that can happen and the biggest difference I can make is making sure governments act.
Today, Prince Charles has been saying that climate change is a major reason for all the horror in Syria. Do you agree with that?
I think it's one of the issues that has placed stress on Syria. I don't think he's saying it's primarily responsible for.
Well, he's saying it's a major reason.
Well, I think it's widely recognised that the issues of drought and water stress in Syria have been a contributory factor to the issues there. But look, there's very, very complicated issues in Syria, and I don't think he's saying that the most important one is climate change.
Well, let's just talk about Syria, because in 2013, when you were leader, Labour didn't back airstrikes. Do you think there's a clearer case this time?
I think it's a different case, but it's a case I'm yet to be convinced of. And let me explain why. ISIL have got to be defeated, but the Foreign Affairs Select Committee, I think, did an excellent report on this. And there are two issues in particular that they raise. And it's a difference between Syria and Iraq. Who is going to do the ground operations against ISIL in Syria? Because there hasn't been a clear answer from the government about that. And secondly, what is the political settlement that we're working towards in Syria? And they haven't been clear about that. Now, look, the Prime Minister has promised answers on this. Let's see whether the answers are convincing.
Well, last time round, you followed your conscience and you whipped Labour MPs. This time round, it's really unclear as to what Jeremy Corbyn's going to be doing. Do you think that any vote on military action for Britain to take abroad should be a free vote, should be a vote of conscience?
Look, honestly, that's not a matter for me. That's a matter for Jeremy Corbyn and the Shadow Cabinet.
Ed Miliband, thank you very much.
Thank you.